fake laugh in 3, 2, 1. Yeah. Oh, that's the thing. All right. So you are listening to The Mentionable. You know, it's been a long time since I've done this. So we are The Mentionables. I'm Joel Furchess.
And I'm Caleb Johnston.
Okay, so in this episode of The Mentionables, we reviewed the new year by talking about the old year. So, today I want to start us off with another episode of Love Song, Worship Song. The way that this works is that I have selected love songs and worship songs. Caleb doesn't know which is which, so I'm going to read off some lyrics from each song, and then he has to determine which one is a love song and which one is a worship song. In the past, I've given him 2 songs, and he's had to determine which one was the love song and which is the worship. Today, we're going to do it a little differently. I'm going to read off lyrics to a song, and then he has to decide on the spot if that song is a love song or if that song is a worship song. Caleb, you ready to do the new way?
Is it a love song? Is it a worship song?
You really want me to lose at this, don't you, Joel?
I do. I really do.
All right, let's go.
Okay. There are 4 songs here. There's about 5 lines from each song, so this isn't going to take too long. All right, first song. Here are the lyrics. Your love is extravagant. Your friendship, it is intimate. I feel like moving to your rhythm. Your fragrance is intoxicating in our secret place. Your love is extravagant. All right, Caleb, was that a love song or a worship song?
Worship song.
That was correct.
Yes.
Ready?
You bet.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
The first song, by the way, was Your Love is Extravagant by Casting Crowns. This next one, the lyrics are, the more I seek you, the more I find you. The more I find you, the more I love you. I want to sit at your feet, drink from the cup in your hand, lay back against you and breathe, feel your heartbeat. This love is so deep, it's more than I can stand. All right, Caleb, love song or worship song?
Worship song.
You're correct. This one is titled The More I Seek You by Gateway Worship. Next song.
Ding, 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 ding.
You've been getting them 100% so far. Let's see if we can trip you up. You are so beautiful to me. You are so beautiful to me. Can't you see? You're everything I hope for. You're everything I need. You are so beautiful to me. You are so beautiful to me. Love song or worship song, Caleb?
Love song.
You are correct.
Love song for sure.
This one is titled You Are So Beautiful by Joe Cocker. I think that's how you say his last name.
I think that's right. I've heard that one before.
Oh, okay. Well, you had the inside track on me. Final song. The lyrics. Just reach out your hand and touch me. Hold me close. Don't ever let me go. More than words is all I ever needed you to show. Then you wouldn't have to say that you love me, 'cause I'd already know. What would you do if my heart was torn in two? More than words to show you feel that your love for me is real. What would you say if I took those words away? Then you couldn't make things new just by saying I love you. Caleb, love song or worship song?
Ooh. Oh, man, you finally got me on a rough one here. This is going to be just a complete guess at this point. I'm going to go with worship song.
Okay. Caleb, you are incorrect. Finally tripped you up. Don't worry, you're still got a good record.
Ouch.
This one's titled More Than Words by
Man, that's...
Extreme.
Oh, man. Finally, one took me down.
Well, I was hoping to do so. Caleb, you got any idea why we do this section? What my point here is?
Well, if I had to make a point from it, my point would be drawing attention to the fact that there's not much difference between secular love songs these days and a lot of the worship songs that are played in church. Maybe we should have a little more distinction there.
I agree. Honestly, being the type of thinker that I am, I get a lot more out of the hymns because there's a lot of theology built into the hymn. When I'm singing this kind of song, the worship type songs that I'm reading, I just kind of my mind phases out and I think other things, and I'm just repeating what I'm reading off the screen at the front. I just don't get anything out of it. I know there are people who do, so I'm not going to generalize and say that, shame on everybody else, but it seems like they should at least mix some things in there that would appeal to both sides, the intuitive thinker and the analytical thinker.
I completely agree, and I'm in the same boat there. When the lyrics just get too repetitive, too watered down, and too mundane, as they're just like everything else you hear on the radio, it just completely tunes me out.
Yep, I agree with that. I hate to get into the whole controversy of what kind of music should we sing in church, because that always bugged me when people did that. But I'll tell you this, as I did research to find these songs, I found an article that said that some of the songs that the worship singers sang were originally written as pop love songs, but the lyrics couldn't be sold. So they just turned around, wrote a couple of words like faith and hope and, salvation and things in there, and then just sold the song to worship and praise groups.
Which actually, this has a interesting tie-in to our last episode in regards to Saint Nicholas. In all irony, Arius, who we talked about the legend of Saint Nicholas punching him in the face at the Council of Nicaea.
Best legend ever.
Yeah, exactly. Interestingly enough, that's actually what he was doing in the church. He was taking a lot of contemporary songs, tagging church, and in his case, heretical lyrics onto these songs, these popular songs, and then just popularizing them in his own name.
You're saying Arius was doing this?
Yep.
Okay. I was hoping it wasn't St. Nicholas. I love that guy. Well, my understanding...
He's good, but another reason to justify.
Yeah. The punch in the face, right?
Yep.
Wow. Imagine I could walk up to Hillsong and punch one of them in the face. Well, anyway.
Let's hope they don't hear this.
Yes. Anyway, that's a thing. I believe you were going to talk about... you had some questions. We're talking about the year of 2018 and what that brought to the Mentionables. Did you have anything you wanted to lay out for me?
Yeah, well, you being the fearless leader of the Mentionables, I do have a couple of questions that I think will get this conversation going. So first off, if you were to mention something mentionable about the Mentionables, what would you mention?
I would mention that it's amazing how much information the people that we have sitting in the pews next to us in church have that never gets tapped into. This is a golden age for apologetics, and partially it is because there's so much information available to every individual because this is the information age. And the second part is that so many people have began to study those things because of the cultural flack that we're getting now as Christians. This is not something that happened, 50 years ago, because 50 years ago there was still some respect for the institution of Christianity and for the Bible. Now there's virtually no respect, and, in some places I might even say contempt for Christianity and for the Bible. And so this is a culture in which we have to go back and we have to start defending the values that we hold because the world around us doesn't hold those values. And if you think about apologetics, in many ways, the modern techniques of apologetics that we use were originally coined by Tertullian, who was living in a similarly secular culture, and he wrote his apologetic manuscript to apologize, so to speak, to defend Christianity to a secular culture, which is what we're doing now. So again, getting back to my original point, what's so amazing about the Mentionables is how much skill these otherwise ordinary people have to their benefit. And when you combine them, when you bring them together as a team working on projects together, it's amazing how well they gel considering our diverse geographical locations.
And I think that's a great answer, and I think it's a great point in regards to, what is brought to the table here. I mean, in all reality, it shouldn't be something that has to be mentioned. It should be the job of every Christian to fill into that role. But I think the way things have come together is really what's the word I'm looking for? A godsend in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think it's coincidental that so many people have been raised up within the church who are skilled at this kind of job and have the enthusiasm to do so. Another thing about the Mentionables, I think, that really brings something to the table that you don't often get is the diverse traditions and backgrounds that they come out of. Listeners won't see this, but behind the scenes, we frequently have discussions about things we don't agree about. And we come from a lot of backgrounds that we have different takes on theology and so forth. And yet when it comes to the essentials, we gel on those things. And the various views and backgrounds we bring are helpful in answering the questions that we encounter because we give several perspectives that when combined really give a well-rounded response and showing how the church actually has these answers.
So in doing that and seeing how that's played out over the last year with the Mentionables, what would you say is the highlight or the moment of the year for you?
Well, the moment of the year was definitely the Mentionable Conference. Going into that room and meeting these guys for the first time, not on the line or online, but actually face-to-face, and seeing how immediately these relationships formed. We were best friends walking through the door, and then getting up on stage and doing the panels together, we were instantly a team. Several of us hadn't even participated on any of the projects that we do. We were just, hanging out there doing our own thing on the webpage, but once we got on the stage, we were instantly a team, and that's, I would say, providential that these particular individuals got called into this ministry and completely by accident. This is something that I've talked about a lot of times previously, how all of this seems to have fallen together by misadventure.
Okay, you say by misadventure. Can you think of anything in particular that you'd like to share with the listeners that maybe you haven't before, or maybe your favorite kind of godsidence of the last year or two?
Well, geez, everything has been that way. Oh, man. Obviously, I've told the story of us coming together dozens of times, so any long-time listeners will know that story. But I'll try to sum it up as briefly as I can. I'm sure you've had this experience being a self-made apologist yourself, but this idea that you'd really like to put together or at least join a larger conference. You attend a couple of apologetics conferences, and you tend to think, I'd like to put one of these things together. Wouldn't that be cool? And I don't know how many people have had this thought, but I'm on first name basis with people like Jim Warner Wallace, and Justin Brierley and a few others, and so it's I have this distant relationship with them where I could write an email or call them, and they might spend a little time talking to me, but they've got their own thing going on. So that's just professional courtesy. I've interviewed them, and I've written things up, and we've coordinated on projects together. So it's nice to have that connection. But in my mind, I thought, if we did a conference, it would be really cool to get these other people that I network with, the ones that have their own podcasts, the ones that write blogs and so forth, that I really think they have impressive material and talent. They just don't have a platform. And, I would like to see what they're like on stage working together. So this was a thought. And, I threw it out there on Facebook, not expecting anything to So, I mean, that's the biggest part, and it always amazes me how that happened. And, in addition to that, I suppose the most amazing thing was how I just selected several people at random that I had been impressed with, and I tagged them on a post, and how well they function together as a team now. That's just really amazing to me.
Well, that's awesome. I think it's awesome too that you can see a way that God could actually work through Facebook of all things.
Yeah, seriously. Who'd have thought that?
So, if you had, let's just say for a minute, let's just go hypothetical for a moment. If you had the time stone, would you change anything over the past year in terms of with the mentionables?
Change anything? Honestly, I can't think of a single thing to change. Again, and that's significant because despite the fact that I coordinate and do a lot of work in terms of putting material together, publishing it on our website and our YouTube page and the podcast that we do, I do a lot of the behind the scenes work for that. But even so, I forgot where I was going with that. The question was, what would I change?
Right, if anything.
Okay, yeah. So the point I was trying to make is that despite the fact that I do so much coordination, every significant thing that has happened so far has happened on its own. I've been sitting here helping out, but it feels as if somebody else is actually coordinating and designing this. So I'll pitch this near the end of the podcast, but we've got our second conference coming up. And it just so happens that Mark Lambert, who anybody who follows the Mentionables will be very familiar with, he participates in most of the projects, and he does so to a great degree. So despite the fact that he's technically part of the network right now, he's one of the most active team members that we have. And he's also a pastor of a church. And as such, he is very well connected in the area in which he lives. And so after seeing the success of the first conference, he just threw it out there that he would be happy to host the next conference. And with his connections, things have fallen into place once again. Again, this was not me coordinating it. It was a person that happened to join the network because he saw me talking about it on a Facebook group we mutually belong to, and things have snowballed since, as all of these things have done.
Wow. That's really exciting, how it's come together and where things are headed. Speaking of which, and you may have just answered this one too, but what are you most excited about for this next year?
Of course, I'm excited about the conference. Honestly, I'm excited to see how the Mentionables as a ministry grow. I've got two options on my head of things that will happen. One of these two things is absolutely going to happen. The first is that the excitement will die, it'll begin to fizzle, and at some point it will evaporate, and we'll look back on it as a fond memory of a thing that we did at one point. But, like everything, it eventually was going to end. Or the other option is that it will continue to grow, as it has done so far, and it might become something bigger than all of us. I'll tell you this honestly, Caleb, my wife is not thrilled at the name The Mentionables because it tends to draw the attention to the individuals within the team. And I agree with her. I think that was a mistake because I told this as a joke. I was talking about getting these under-the-radar guys on a stage and making them mentionable in a world of celebrity apologists. So it truly was a joke when I chose that name, and I wasn't intending on any of this happening at the time I threw it out. But it's just kind of stuck and happened with us. If I had... Yeah, okay, you would ask me what I could go back and do differently. The thing I would go back and do differently is to title it Mentionable, not The Mentionables, because mentionable draws the attention to the message and the gospel. Mentionables kind of draws it to the men within the team. So we'll have to see if that ever changes right there.
Ooh, that's interesting. I like that, and nice way to tie it back into the other question as well. Do you think if we did drop the and just went with mentionable, do you think we could ever get a sponsorship by Mentionables lingerie?
You know what? Since you mentioned that, there was a band back in the early to mid 2000s. I think the last album they released was in about 2007, and they were called The Mentionables. And I've always thought in the back of my head, what if we could get one of their songs to be our theme song? Wouldn't that be nice? It'd be poetic in a way.
That'd be pretty great.
I think so.
You know, if we did end up with Mentionables sponsoring the Mentionables, you know, we could always move into doing, you know, apologetics marriage conferences.
Yeah, sure. You tell me how that works.
Yeah, I don't know that I want to go down that road just yet.
Okay. Moving along. I think there's some things that are not mentionable within that service.
Yeah, I would guess that is the case. So don't look it up. Don't go there. Of course, now that I say that, people will, but what you going to do?
Yeah, you talked about lingerie. I mean...
Yeah. So is there anywhere that you don't see this going in terms of topics or effort, you know, in the future? Anything that's off limits for the Mentionables?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything. Obviously, we wouldn't want to do anything that wasn't glorifying to God, you know, anything that wasn't Christian in nature. You know, now that you mention it, there is, again, I've talked about the in-house debates that occur out of the spotlight between various members who have diverse views about things like predestination and free will and, you know, other churchy type things like paedobaptism or credo baptism and things that probably don't interest your average person in the pews. But they're important to the people who are more entrenched in the theology behind those things. So I would hope that that doesn't ever creep into the ministry, that, you know, we can talk about those behind the scenes, but we never make our debates or conferences about these controversial in-house issues. Another issue that we come across a lot in the questions we answer, which is a little irritating to me, is this whole young earth versus old earth creationism, or since we've got Tyler who does the polemic version of the creation story, which is to say that the story itself was simply a retelling of Egyptian mythology in a way that put God at the center rather than focusing on these pagan gods. So it wasn't so much a telling of a literal event as it was a refocusing of the mythology that the people of Israel had come out of on a monotheistic, all-powerful God that is the center of creation. So that's all well and good, but it's the idea behind creationism is something that a lot of people within the evangelical church attach a lot of value to. And unfortunately, because they do, it's a foothold that skeptics and atheists tend to get a lot of use out of, because it's something they can attack, which is very important to a lot of Christians' worldview. And it's not something that is easy to defend. You know, in apologetics, you either dismiss the creation story and focus on the other things, or you spend all of your time on the creation story. There doesn't seem to be a third option there.
Right. So if I'm kind of hearing you correctly, you would like that the Mentionables stays away from drawing any hard dividing line on these things.
Yeah.
In terms of
go on.
In terms of our overall approach and addressing of these topics,
I would like all of the things that the Mentionables do to remain on attacks on the Christian worldview rather than internal debates. I don't think that's helpful, especially since the members of the Mentionables come from a very wide, diverse background in terms of doctrine and theology. I think we can continue to work together because we're focusing on the skeptical attacks on Christianity, and we can continue to unite on the important issues related to the historical Jesus and the minimal things we can agree on for salvation, rather than carry along the baggage of various traditions and doctrines that may disagree in our personal views. The fact that we can come together as a team because we've got a common cause that we relate to, and still hold to a variety of doctrines in the background, shows the grace of God. Another thing that, this is an argument that a lot of people use against Christianity, and that is to say that there's so much disagreement within the Christian church. You've got all of these different churches that are constantly splintering off from each other over a variety of issues that, in the very end, probably don't bear that much value in, say, the eternal realm. This is something my dad always used to tell me, is that when you die, you're definitely going to find out you were wrong on some things. And, that has a lot of impact on a Christian church that, for whatever reason, individuals within the church seem to believe that they have to be certain about everything. You pick up a doctrine, and that doctrine has to be written in stone, and if somebody disagrees with it, that is the end. You cut that person off, and you argue to your deathbed about that issue, and it shouldn't be that way. We have the freedom to disagree within the church, and we're probably all still going to die and be accepted into the gates of heaven.
I really like that, Joel, and I think that really speaks to your point, too, in regards to what the Mentionables is about. It's not about the individual members. It's about what is actually mentionable, which is the gospel. That's what unites us. That's what should unite all Christians, not these little side debates over who's right and wrong over XYZ.
Yeah, and if listeners were able to see the side debates that go on behind the scenes, they would see how we are able to have those debates in a winsome and friendly manner. There's a lot of joking that goes on in the process of having those debates, and we're all sensitive to the conviction of each other, and we're able to disagree about our convictions without, getting emotional about it, and still accepting one another as brothers in Christ.
And that's really important, not just for any apologetics team per se, but for any team has to be able to see past their differences if they're going to accomplish a common goal.
Absolutely.
So out of kind of speaking about the podcast to go in a little bit of a different direction, are there any particular episodes this past year that have kind of stood out to you as ones you particularly enjoyed or found something extra interesting about?
This last year, when did we do our Lovecraft episode? It wouldn't have been within this year.
I think that was
2017.
Yeah, it was right there on the cusp, I think.
Well, that's all right. Off the top of my head, I can't think of the episodes that I really enjoyed. I enjoy each episode. I think they're all my children, and so I can't pick out from among them the one that was better than the others.
Okay, well, to take it a little bit of a different direction then, in moving forward, if you could get any guest for any topic down the road for the podcast, who would you want and why?
Man, the thing that really I find charming about this particular format is that we don't have guests. We don't bring in famous people. Who we bring in are the people that are very much behind the scenes. And all of the people I tagged in that original post were the ones that I wanted to have around. So asking for new guests, it would have to be somebody who's under the radar, just like we are. It would have to be somebody that doesn't get the attention. Because, You listen to a podcast like Nick Peters' podcast, Deeper Waters. That's what he does. He has guests on. That's the entire format of his podcast, is to have guests on. And I'll be honest with you, I kind of find interview podcasts a little boring. I like podcasts where you get to know the people on the podcast, because it's like every time that podcast download, you're revisiting old friends and people that you've gotten to know and that you're really comfortable with, versus an interview show where you get to, be introduced to a new person every episode, and within 30 minutes you have to find out what they're about and what their style is and decide whether you like them or not, and then the episode's over. So I'm not a big fan of interview episodes, I'll be honest.
Fair enough. I've got to admit that, if anybody from any time, we do still have that time stone in play. So, if we could bring Arius on, with all the trash talk we've given him the last couple episodes, I think that would be an interesting addition.
I didn't know the time stone was still in play.
Of course, it's always in play.
Oh, man. Does that change things?
So if we're keeping this kind of format, and we always try and mix it up with some kind of new segments and stuff, do you have any previews for us of what's coming segment-wise in the future? Any new or different ideas that you may throw at me at some point?
Well, I kind of like to get back into the thumbs up, thumbs down, because that was a really fun thing that Neil and I used to do when we did the Sunday Night Lives. And I'd like to revisit the Sunday Night Live if at all possible, because I think that was a great format, and I like the idea of having fans being able to interact. Yeah, and in fact, if we were to have a call-in show where we could start taking calls at some point, segment of the podcast, that'd be kind of cool too. I don't see that happening with the technology we have at our disposal, but maybe sometime. But yeah, thumbs up, thumbs down.
Hey,
I think I'm going to bring that back.
Okay. When are you thinking about doing that?
I'm thinking about doing that right now, at this very moment.
Oh, okay.
So we had some thumbs up, thumbs down that I was able to dig up from when we used to do it that never got answered because Neil sort of dropped off the map. And as an update on old Neil, he had a child. Yes, he sired a son, and now apparently that's his full-time interest, is taking care of that child. And I suppose I can't say anything against that. Children are our future, ladies and gentlemen. Anyways, so what has happened with him is that as interested as he is in the endeavors that we've done, he is devoting himself to family, which I can say nothing against. That's what he should do. And so he's still in the roster on the back burner, so to speak. If he ever chose to step up and do things with the Mentionables again, he's welcome to do so. But I wouldn't expect him to do anything in the near future, if at all. So, Caleb, you're the new guy.
Oh boy.
You're the new Neil, so do voiceovers.
All right.
It.
Okay. Oh, I can work on that.
Anyways, yeah, so at any rate, we had some thumbs up, thumbs down submissions that never got read on Sunday Night Live. For listeners who can't dig back that far in their memory and don't know what I'm talking about, the format was that individuals that followed the Mentionables would give us a statement. The statement could be anything, like, well, let's see, one of the ones we had was, ketchup is the king of the condiments. Another was something to the effect of, King Kong could beat Godzilla in a fight. Essentially it's a statement, and then we look at that statement and we give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Statements often strayed from the realm of apologetics, which is fine because it's a fun segment. The statements I was able to pull that never got reviewed on thumbs up and thumbs down are all very much theological in nature. So if you're prepared to do something Christian-y right now, Caleb, we could get into that.
All right, hit me.
Okay, so the first statement is not theological in nature, and it came from our good buddy JD. You ready for this one?
Maybe not after all.
JD says, Thanos did nothing wrong. Thumbs up or thumbs down?
I'm gonna go with a big thumbs down on that one.
Okay, so Thanos' philosophy was that if everything was perfectly balanced, the universe would be a better place. And so he perfectly balanced things by cutting out half the population of the universe. The idea behind that being that with less of a population, there would be more resources and a great improvement in the nature of the universe. You don't like that philosophy. Why not?
No, I think that you have to take into account a number of things. Simply changing and balancing the number of people is not going to do anything in that regard. So if we leave behind 51%, of white supremacists, for example, you're going to have a very quickly a decline in balance already. So there's some instant kind of intellectual issues present there, not to mention the moral implications of what it means to take on that act. I mean, that's such a evil act, if you will, to take control of the universe in such a godlike manner. You are already subjecting the universe to your will. So it is such an act of evil in that sense, because you have to prove that your will is the ultimate and supreme good versus the universe even just playing out as it is.
I additionally would give it a thumbs down. Honestly, the biggest problem I feel with his plan is with the godlike power that he had, he could have easily doubled the resources instead of halved the people. If his problem is that there's not enough resources to go around with the current population of the universe, that was a problem he could fix without killing people. So I feel as if his solution was the wrong solution. But in addition to that, I think that you could conceivably take a population of however many and allow them to create and expand resources. It would take so many individuals to fill the universe to the extent that they are using every resource available within the universe. All you have to do is to buoy up the people who are in the universe and show them how they can better access and develop those resources, and you've created progress. By having the number of people in the universe, all you're doing is making these people dependent on the existing resources and techniques for harvesting those resources, and so no progress is made whatsoever. Progress would overcome the problem of overpopulation that he saw.
Good point.
Anyway, so that was that. Anything more to say on that one before we move on?
I don't think so, but that one may haunt me for a while.
As it was meant to. All right, everything else is super theological in nature, and all of the following come from one of our foremost followers, because this guy has submitted questions of the week. This guy has asked for resources, so he's very active as a fan of the Mentionables, and he gave us a lot of thumbs up, thumbs down questions. So you're ready to do some Christian-y things?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, first statement. Hope is but the spine of faith. That would take some thinking, doesn't it?
Yeah. Hope is but the spine of faith.
I suppose another way to support our...
I'm really thinking through this analogy.
Yes, another way to put it probably would be that hope is that which supports faith. While you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
There's the coupling of hope and faith when Paul says that these three remain, faith, hope, and love. So there is the combining of those things within Paul's doctrine. If you take hope is the it's the belief that there is something, I suppose, in the future that is going to benefit the individual at that time, and so it's this working towards a hope that we have. So as Christians, for instance, the hope would be our eventual redemption in Christ and the perfection of the world and so forth. And so what is faith? Faith is trust. So if we have a hope in the future, meaning that we have something that we are certain of that we're working towards, and then we step out in faith, that being trust, towards that hope, I don't know that being the spine of faith is the correct analogy, but hope is definitely related to faith. So, I'll give that one of those things where the thumb's in the middle, just kind of hovering between up and down.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. I was leaning towards, the thumbs down because, some other things probably fit the spine analogy better, but you make some good points on it. You kind of swayed me back towards that, middle wiggle.
Okay, so the next statement. Pride is the hidden reef that shipwrecks the soul.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and go with a straight-up thumbs up on this one. I think that that analogy is pretty clear. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think when you read Ecclesiastes, it lines up really well with what you see there in terms of that, as well as what you see in many self-focused religions, is that it is a pride and a self-worship that drive motivations eventually, and this is exactly what leads to many people's downfalls.
Okay, I agree that pride leads to downfalls. The problem I have with this statement is that it says it is hidden. I don't think there's anything about pride that is hidden, and I don't think that the proud individual it would take a lot of intentional turning of the head and closing of the eyes for them to not realize the dangers of being overly proud. I feel that pride is probably something that you struggle with as a proud person. Now, I would say that maybe indifference might be a hidden reef. Pride, I would say, is a very visible reef. So I'm going to give that one a thumbs down because, yeah, I don't find pride to be very hidden at all. I think it's an obvious thing.
I think that's fair enough. I think for a lot of times for the individual himself, it is hidden compared to other people may be able to see it very clearly what's going on, or may see that pride beginning to wreck them. But often it's far too late for the person in that situation.
Okay, that's fair. All right, the next statement. The humble heart is happy to do what pride won't.
Let me hear your take on this one first.
Okay, I think that's fair. I'm giving that a solid thumbs up. The humble heart is happy to do what pride won't. So, say that, well, okay, an obvious example would be when Christ washed the feet of his disciples. Any proud individual would not even consider doing that act, especially in the context of the time period. That would be below practically anybody who had any kind of self-esteem at that time. So the humble heart was happy to do that. I think that was a very humbling and also joyful act for Christ to do, which he never would have done if he had a proud heart rather than a humble heart. So yeah, I think that's an obvious thumbs up.
Yeah, and thinking over it too, just the opposition of pride and humility does kind of lay that one out as being a thumbs up for me as well.
All right, so we're about halfway down the list with this next question, and it is, ego is the anesthesia that deadens the pain of stupidity.
Yeah, I don't have to think on that one long. I think I'm a thumbs up with that one.
Yeah, I'm a thumbs up. Well, you know what? Here's my take on it that may give it a thumbs down, and that is that ego probably chafes against stupidity. a great deal, because one has to justify one's acts when one does or says something stupid. And there's, again, it's kind of this humility thing. You do something stupid, you see the results, and you have a big ego. You have to do a lot of work to justify the thing that you did. So I've known people like this, that they do or say something which was regrettable, probably impulsive. It's not something that if they'd really thought it out, they would have said or done. But since the deed was already done, they had to stand there and justify why that deed, made sense in their ego-filled mind, why that was a cool thing to do, when it clearly wasn't to everyone in the room. And this ends up being a very difficult experience for them because, they really struggle and they dig a ditch that they can't get out of to justify the stupid thing they'd just done. So ego does not deaden the pain of stupidity. If anything, it enhances it. So I'm going to give it a thumb down.
Okay, and I think we're thinking of two very different kind of people here. I've certainly seen the type of people you're talking about, but I've also seen the people who seem so medicated by their ego that literally stupidity seems to roll off their back because their ego just leaves no room for it.
All right, fair enough. Okay, next statement. You may be just one decision from a totally different life.
I'm going to go ahead and give a thumbs down to this one. I don't agree with this. I think that a lot of our decisions could potentially have that ripple effect. We've talked some, I think, on here about the butterfly effect before. Mm-hmm. So potentially one decision could impact and have ripples on not just your life, but significantly others. But I've also seen in my own life how things come back around. Things are so cyclical in life that you are often given a chance to not necessarily correct for mistakes, but you're given the same decision again in a different form. So I think that all of this in reality leads to a shaping of your life in a way that it's, for lack of a better word, I try and use atheist-friendly language most of the time,
sure.
For lack of a better way to describe it. But I think it's hard to deny that there is a distinct design and purpose to individual lives where they are shaped and molded towards an ultimate goal.
So it seems like I'm giving this one a thumbs up. And it seems like the difference between your answer and mine has a lot to do with the concept of free will versus predestination. Everything you just said seems like a very predestination-ish type of thing. And, if you look at the statement prima facie, it seems very obvious to me. We've talked about the mentionables and how they formed. If I hadn't gone online and made a post that, on a whim and tagged a couple of people in it, you and I wouldn't be talking right now. I don't know what I'd be doing, but I wouldn't be talking to you. How the mentionables are a significant part of that, because since I'm the one behind the scenes doing all the heavy lifting right now. But, another decision that impacted my life was several years ago. I was in North Carolina being involved in a camp that a summer camp for children at a church down there. And I was involved in doing some of the classes that the kids took in that summer camp. And at the time, I was involved enough in that church that I got to know a teenager that was working at the church. He and I kind of gelled because I did art and he did art. And when I was at the end of the summer, I was moving back to my state, and he wanted to keep in touch, so he insisted that I join a particular social media network that I'm not going to name because I don't want to tell my age on here. But at any rate, I joined this social media network because he insisted on it. And he and I fell out of touch anyway, despite me having joined this social media network. But my wife now was coming to the state in which I live, and she was doing a summer camp here, coincidentally, and she ended up staying with a family that was just a couple of teenage girls, and she didn't like hanging out with them all the dang time. So she was trying to find somebody more her age to hang out with, and she found some Christians on this social media network which were local, and she just kind of sent a greeting to them and asked for friendship, friended them on the network and started talking to them, and I started talking to her, and we started hanging out, and now I'm married to her and have 3 kids. So the decision to join that social media network at the insistence of this kid ended up leading to my marriage and the 3 children I have now. So again, one decision away from a totally different life.
Interesting. I'm surprised we split on that one, but so it goes.
Yep. Well, you and I don't think exactly alike, or else we wouldn't be mentionables.
Precisely.
All right, we've got 4 more to go. Next one. Anxiety doesn't come from the future. It comes from wanting to control it.
Being a psych major and having a little too much knowledge about anxiety, I'm going to give this a thumbs down because there are a lot of causes of anxiety. To say it's just from wanting to control the future, I'm going to argue that's a no.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing you'd see on a poster or an inspirational calendar or something like that. And you and I are in the same background, and I have the same answer that you did, that anxiety can come from a number of different sources, and putting it in sort of a Confucius says kind of quote like that really shows a great deal of ignorance on how anxiety works.
Right.
So yeah, next one. Patience is accepting a difficulty without giving God a deadline to solve it.
Yeah, I think, again, a little Confucius-y for me, but yeah, I can get on board with that one with a thumbs up.
It seems a little too simplistic for me, so I'll give it a thumbs down only because I think patience is a lot more than just what the statement says. But I'm not saying the statement doesn't encapsulate a certain form of patience.
Right.
Okay, humility opens the ears of opportunity.
You know what? I'm going to swing on this one and do a thumbs down for the same reason you did on the last one.
Yeah, so humility opens the ears of opportunity. Honestly, I don't even know what that means in practice.
Yeah, again, I think just too simplistic of you for me here.
Yeah, at this point, I think the guy was just flipping through his inspirational calendar quotes.
Fair enough.
All right, last one. Comfort is the enemy of achievement.
Despite wanting to lean towards a thumbs down here for the same reason as the last one, I'm going to go ahead and give this one a thumbs up. This is one that I'd, put up in my office type deal. I like that.
Okay, I'm giving that a thumbs up as well. And the reason that I'm doing that is if you look at this particular age in human history, we are chock full of comfort. I mean, we've got our Serta mattresses that have a comfort memory foam, and we've got our tennis shoes with the springs built into them to give us the best lumbar support, and we've got our big cushy chairs, and you get the idea. Moisture wicking, underwear, whatever. And so comfort is sort of the watchword of this particular age. We've got anti-anxiety medication, things that they never would have had in previous ages of history. And if you look at the foundation upon which we stand, there is so much work that went into that. I can imagine myself in the position of an individual, hundreds of years in the past, waking up at the wee hours of the morning before the sun rises and going out and plowing my field and, building my own house by my hands and all of the things they had to do back then because they didn't have the kinds of comforts that we have. That was a lot of achievement that they made at that time period because the comfort wasn't there to spend too much time relaxing in it. So, yeah, I'm going to give this one a thumbs up.
Works for me.
Okay, that was the last one. Now, we've got one final thing to do, and then we'll cut it out for this podcast. We're running a little long. This was in line with everything the Mentionables has done since we formed, which is to answer atheist questions. And so both Caleb and I have lists that neither one has seen of these atheist questions that are supposed to stump Christians. We're going to ask each other the question on the spot and see how we do. You want to go first, Caleb, or shall I?
Sure thing. I will hit you first here now. Now, this comes from an article that adds quite a bit of depth to some of these questions, but I'm going to keep them at their base kind of core here for you.
Yep.
So, why can't God control everything?
Why can God not control everything? Well, I would say that God can control everything, but again, these are the types of questions that can stray into logical inconsistencies. It gets into the things like, can God create a rock bigger than he can lift? And you can't have that because that's a nonsense statement. It's like saying a square circle or things like that. It's not logically consistent. So can God control everything? If by everything you mean all propositions, logical or illogical, then no, he can't do that. But in regards to everything else that's logically consistent within the universe, God can control it. Honestly, the only obstacle that sits in God's path is God himself. Because God is all-powerful, there are certain things that he cannot do because they're inconsistent with ultimate power. So things would be, God could not commit suicide. God could not create another God equal unto himself. God cannot make a rock bigger than he can lift. Because of his ultimate nature, he can't supersede the ultimate nature. It's like asking you to add 1 to infinity. It's a nonsense statement. So, in that respect, the universe in which we dwell is as God would have it to be. And, of course, that's going to grate on the nerves of all of those who have the objection of evil and suffering. And with the amount of time we've spent on the podcast so far, I don't have time to go into that because it's a very deep issue. I suspect the person who asked this question is directly referencing the problem of evil. The assumption being if God would control everything, he would not allow the universe to be such as it is. And if he's allowing it to be such as it is and he can control everything, then he must himself be evil. This is a statement that requires a little bit of sussing out. The only thing I can say in short would be that in order for God to control evil, evil has to exist. In order to evil to exist, good has to exist. So you can't say God doesn't exist because there is evil. Another thing I could say, this is my ultimate thought experiment when it comes to the problem of evil. You got a world. The world has evil in it. Bad things happen. In order for this world to be perfect rather than bad, what would God have to remove? Let's say that God removed all natural evil, things like hurricanes and tornadoes and fires and so forth. In fact, let's go so far as to say that God made all humans immortal, because the ultimate natural evil is that we decay over time and eventually die. So let's say that we were all immortal, could feel no pain, and all of these natural evils were to be eliminated. Has God eliminated evil? I'll float this question over to you, Caleb. At that point, has God eliminated all evil?
Not really.
Okay.
Because we're so much of the cause of our own evil.
I agree.
Yeah, the only way to truly eliminate evil would be to eliminate humanity.
Okay, so we're in agreement on that, because if you eliminate natural evil, you still have envy and lust and pain and divorce and all of the problems we bring on each other. In a world that is perfect in a natural sense, you still have human evil, the manipulation that we do towards each other, and the suffering we bring upon each other. So in order for God to make the world perfect, he would not need to just eliminate natural evil. He would need to somehow eliminate human evil, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so let's say that God found a way to purify the human heart so that humans were perfected, and thereafter he were able to create a naturally perfect world wherein there is no suffering. So the human heart is perfected and the natural world is perfected. Would that eliminate all evil?
That sure would, if you ask me.
Okay, so let's see. Let's say I'm God and I want to eliminate all the evil in the world. I would need to find some way to allow humans to be perfected in my nature. After those humans who chose to be perfected in my nature accepted the salvation that I offered, let's say that I judged the ones that didn't accept that salvation so that human evil was eliminated in that sense as well, and then I recreated the world in a perfect state. In that case, I have eventually eliminated all evil, right?
Right.
Okay. So, it seems like God could probably control everything.
Yeah, I would say so.
All right. So that was your question. I want you to choose a number between 1 and 50.
Oh, ouch. I'm afraid I may know where this is going. Let's go with number 37.
37. All right. You ready for this one?
I hope so.
All right. Here's the question. If it is easier for a camel to fit through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter heaven, then why are there wealthy Christians?
Oh, boy. Okay. So here we're dealing with a passage of Scripture where Jesus is using parables. So parables are essentially stories that are possibly true, and they use very much like what we refer to as a modern-day analogy. It's a short story that is memorable to teach a lesson. So here we're seeing a parable being used in the sense of the camel fitting through the eye of a needle. Now we have to look at this in terms of the historical context as well. So I'm not particularly well versed on this particular example, but I do know that there's some doubt on the historical context as to exactly what the language is referring to here, as to whether it really is the eye of a sewing needle as we're talking about here. But all that aside, the point is, it goes back to a lot of what we talked about on the thumbs up, thumbs down, is it's not necessarily the money that's the issue as much as it is the attitude of the heart. The attitude of the heart is what shapes what is actually going on with someone rather than this, for example, the pride we were talking about earlier. It's hard when you're wealthy to not have pride or to seek humility in a way that is already necessary for someone who doesn't have the same funds or resources. I've noticed this in my own life in good times versus bad times, which I've seen a little bit of, and it's significantly easier to seek God when you're constantly relying on Him versus when you have pride in what you've been able to accomplish and what you have. So again, here we're looking at a parable that shows a example. It does not necessarily mean a perfect literal reflection of what is going on here, but it is an example to show a bigger principle at play.
All right. Sounds good. Okay, that was the last segment I had. Anything you want to add before we promote the conference?
I think that's it for me today, Joe.
Okay. So, one last rumination about the year of 2018. The Mentionables had their very first annual conference in May of 2018. Not long after that first annual conference, the Mentionables project, which is our first signature project, was published on May 29th. So not too long after we had our first conference, we had our first book published. This coming March, the Mentionables are having their second annual conference. This conference is being held in Waco, Texas. There's information about the conference on both our website and the Facebook page if you want to find out details. But this conference will feature all of the Mentionables from the previous conference, except for Adam, who will be missed. And then we have Clinton Wilcox, who is an apologist on the board of one of these pro-life institutes, and he will be coming and talking about bioethics. Bioethics being things like any kind of termination of life that is being justified in some way, euthanasia and abortion and things like that. And so he's going to introduce us to that and speak on that. In addition, we're going to have Nick Peters finally give his talk on the resurrection. Nick Peters' area of specialty is the resurrection. He's studied under both Mike Licona, who happens to be his father-in-law, and under Gary Habermas, who is one of the world's foremost scholars on the resurrection. And for some reason, Nick knows him and has studied under him as well. So, yeah, Nick's very well versed in the resurrection. So seeing him is going to be kind of like seeing a combination of Mike Licona and Gary Habermas. So we've got that going on. Mark Lambert, who, if you keep up with the Mentionables on any of our other media networks, YouTube and the book that we've written and so forth, is very involved in the writing and speaking that we have. He's going to be there. In fact, he's the one who's invited us out and set up the conference there in Waco, and he will be speaking about dealing with doubts and following the truth where it leads. So that's going to be his subject. We're going to have breakout sessions. Clinton Wilcox is leading one, and we'll have Nick Peters leading one. I'm sure there's other people involved. I don't remember off the top of my head who else is doing the breakout sessions. Now, Tyler Vela, who is one of the founding members of the Mentionables, is going to be there, and he's going to be pulling double duty. He's going to be giving a talk on slavery in the Bible, and he's going to be our debater this year as well. We were trying to get Nick to be our debater this year, but certain circumstance prevented it. We're hoping that in future conferences he'll finally get a chance to sit down and debate the historical Jesus and the resurrection, because he's going to hammer whoever he goes up against. So that's happening. Tyler is debating. You ready for this one, Caleb?
I'm ready, Joe.
Aaron Ra.
What? Yeah, infamously, yes, I do.
Yeah, so for listeners who are not in the know, could you tell us about Aaron Ra a little bit?
Yes, he is a atheist who is has quite the social media presence in regards to various debates online. I've seen him frequently contribute to the Non Sequitur show, as well as, of course, quite a bit on his own YouTube channel, and quite the adamant spokesperson against creationism, particularly young earth creationism. But I believe his background is in evolutionary biology. I could be mistaken, but I think that's at least somewhere in the ballpark. Very interesting personality. I know he's also been quite involved in the political scene there in Texas in recent years as well.
Yeah, his wife apparently deals with bioethics as well, but she kind of takes the opposite stance of Clinton Wilcox. As a matter of fact, Clinton tells me that when he did a debate at one point, she was in the audience and she was kind of shouting out and trolling him a bit from the audience, not during question and answers time periods. At any rate, so Aaron Ra and Tyler Vela are going to be debating. They're going to be debating the conflict thesis or hypothesis. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
the conflict hypothesis. I'm assuming you're talking about the conflict between religion and science.
Bingo! Did you hear me?
I sure did, Joe.
Okay. So that's happening. So this is going to be a little exciting because we got Ben Watkins for the last debate. And Ben Watkins has a decent following on relay theology, but I would say that his is dwarfed by Aaron Ra's following. Aaron Ra, for whatever reason, is very popular in the online infidel scene. And so he might be bringing some of his followers along to the debate. The debate is open for all. There's no door charge to come and attend the debate. You would have to pay for the conference, but not the debate. And so it's open to all. Maybe some atheists will be in attendance, so we'll have to see how that plays out. It's Texas, so, there's probably going to be some no-nonsense rednecks in the crowd. So come for the brawl if you don't come for anything else. All right. Anything you want to say before we close out?
That sounds like an absolute blast, Joel.
Thank you for listening to The Mentionables. Keep on listening and keep on mentioning.